All right, let's talk about a race that's getting a lot of PAC money brought in, and probably other than the governor's race is receiving the most attention.
Secretary of State?
Huh?
Secretary of State?
Well, we could probably skip over that one, but let's go to Attorney General, where you have Andy Beshear, son of the sitting governor, who's been raising money, I know of since at least January of 14, against Whitney Westerfield, the senator out of Hopkinsville, I think, and who's not spending much of money he's raised, but he's getting a lot of support from the Republican Attorney Generals. Andy Beshear has raised a lot of money, and it looks like it's a close race, would you think, within the margin of error in that race?
That's what I'm hearing. I guess polls are polls. But yeah, there's an unbelievable amount of money being spent. The Republican Attorney Generals Association, I read something this morning about who's financing them, and it was the Koch brothers and big business and very much out of state interest. That by the way, the Family Values PAC did do a lot of positive things for me last year, and
for you and against someone.
Yeah, and if you want to get into PACs, if we get into the Americans for Growth and Prosperity, they're about as evil and nasty as any I've ran across. I can testify.
What
to
about
that.
Whitney Westerfield and Andy Beshear?
Well, I think I serve with Whitney. In fact, I'm on he's on a board that I chair, Capital Planning Advisory Board, and so we've worked with Whitney on that board, and I know him, and he's a nice young fella. And to be honest, I'm not really qualified to judge his work as an attorney or a Commonwealth attorney or whatever he did before he came to the legislature. I know he beat a long-time state senator from down there where he came from, Joey Pendleton, and that was a shock. And I know when he came to the House, they immediately gave him the chairmanship of the Judiciary Committee, which I thought was a little quick, but that's not for me to think about, actually. And then as the campaign, and other than that, about all I know is what the campaign had to say on both sides. And both sides are calling each other bad guys like they always do. And I do know that Andy I've got to know him somewhat, and he's a gentle guy who is determined, and he cares about the same things. He cares about abused children, taking care of the elderly, and that's part of his platform that he pushes. And having worked for Social Security 35 years and having had grandchildren, and like most of us, I'm very much in sync with what he plans to do on that and would support him in any way I could.
All right, let me ask you. He's caught a lot of criticism, not just from the Republican Party, but basically, quote unquote, being accused of raising so many campaign dollars based on the fact that his dad is governor. How do you answer those things?
It's kind of like it speaks for itself. I mean, the facts are his dad is governor. The facts are his dad had an extensive fundraising effort, successful, and the fact is that Andy has raised money. You have to leave it to conjecture. Everybody has to make their own mind up about that, I think. I just hate the fact that money is so controlling in all these races. I just wish we could find a way in Kentucky and in America to better, more fairly fund our campaigns and give each candidate a chance to do it without having to raise those kind of funds. I do know Andy's working hard. I know he's around. He came down to Marion County Jail last week, spent 2 hours listening to our jailer tell about what he's doing to try to keep those guys from coming back to jail. I know he's working hard, and he's a good guy.
Okay.
Yeah, first time I ever heard of Andy Beshear was in 2014, and you probably heard of him about the same time. And yeah, he's the governor's son, and he's a lawyer in a big firm in Louisville, but he came to the legislature and into the Public Service Commission, introducing around the people from Williams and Boardwalk to do the Bluegrass Pipeline. He was trying to help push through the Bluegrass Pipeline. And I'm sure that, the relationships he's established through that, have helped him in his fundraising. But that was a great disappointment to a lot of us, especially in this area. Bluegrass Pipeline and the taking of private property for a non-public use was a serious thing in Terry's mind and in my mind. And so that was my first exposure to Andy. And look, I like Steve Beshear. He's a good fella. And I've never met Andy face to face. I know that he's an attorney, and you do what you're hired to do as an attorney. But he did it with gusto, and of course it was because his father was the governor, and his name carried a lot of weight at that time. Now, Whitney Westerfield, like Terry said, he's a fine man. He's a good Christian man. I've worked with Terry, with Whitney Westerfield.
We worked with Terry too.
And I worked with Terry too. Yeah, Terry and I worked on several bills together. Still well.
That's right.
But I went into Whitney's office to talk to him about a couple of bills that were important to me, and one of them had to do with the ability to expunge Class D felonies so that people can get on with their lives when they have these non-violent, non-sexual offenses. 18 years old, get busted for pot, and they pay for it for the rest of their life. And so the Senate leadership was not, we passed that out of the House. We've done it with a higher percentage of the vote every year, and the Senate was not going to move that. I think in the next session we'll be able to move that. But Whitney is moving toward that. You see, he was a criminal prosecutor, and he knows he knows firsthand as I think deputy Commonwealth attorney,
assistant
Commonwealth
like that,
attorney,
yeah.
and he knows firsthand the individuals, the families that are involved in that, knows that they're human beings, that they have a right to move things on. Every candidate ever running for Attorney General, they're going to do what they can to help the seniors, to help the disabled, and so that's a kind of a generic platform thing. I make my judgment on the fact that I do know Whitney, have worked with Whitney, and I like him very much, and on the fact that Andy was such a strong lobbyist on behalf of the Bluegrass Pipeline, which is a real disappointment for me.
Do you want to address that? Because obviously that's a big issue here. Have you had to, has it come up?
Yeah, I haven't. I wasn't aware that he was, I believe as David put, such a strong lobbyist for the Bluegrass
He took him around
Pipeline.
and introduced him to the Public Service Commission.
I do know that Andy worked for the firm
Right.
that represented them, and I believe their side of the story is that Andy didn't do any work directly related to getting the Bluegrass Pipeline through or pushing eminent domain on these.
You can talk to Tom Fitzgerald about that one.
Yeah, and I don't have any personal knowledge of it, but I'm just saying
Or Sister
I'm
Claire
not aware.
McGowan can tell you too.
Yeah. Well, we would hope that if Andy did that, we could probably change his direction on that. But yeah.
All right, I guess one race that we could probably almost gloss over but deserves mentioning, Secretary of State Allison Lundergan Grimes, the incumbent, against Stephen Nipper. I guess probably even on your side of the aisle, that race is over with.
Well, again, the only thing that could save the Steve Nipper campaign is that there's a backlash against the National Party, the president, and Allison's close ties in the way she embraced him during the last campaign for senator. But other than that, I think it would just have to be a reaction to that in a low turnout election.
Let me ask you a question, and you're a Democrat. And the president is a Democrat. You're a Republican.
Let's just say.
All right, let's say you're a Republican.
Yeah.
We have an unpopular Republican president.
Mm-hmm.
Would you vote for an unpopular Republican president, or would you vote for the Democrat?
It depends on who the two are. Let's take the current election, for example. If we have, at the final analysis, if we have Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Okay.
I don't know what I'm going to do, because either one of them, if we had a third-party candidate like James Webb, that's the only thing I could imagine that I would do, because I couldn't support either one of them. But if Donald Trump came here to campaign for me, I would probably find myself in the other part of the state.
All right, well, but what does Barack Obama have to do with being Secretary of State in Kentucky?
Well, again, it's you are who you hang with, and we know you by the company that you keep. So if and this happens a lot in campaigns. Where you are makes what you say kind of depends on where you are. And if you're over in Eastern Kentucky, you're talking about how much you love coal. And if you're in downtown Lexington, you're talking about how much you like renewable energy. And if you're over in Western Kentucky, again, where the coal fields are, you're a big coal proponent. And so it's the same thing here, and that's, I think, I mean, my district is hugely Democrat. And I don't think that those people identify with the national politics of the Democrat Party, but they're born and raised Democrats and they're going to stay that. But they don't vote that way, obviously, or I wouldn't be there. So, there are some who will distance themselves from that, and there are others who don't. And in this case, Allison did not. She, you need money to run these races, and so, that brings money in when you put your arms around somebody on the national level. And I tell you, I bet you that 80% of the Democrats in Marion and Nelson County don't agree with a good portion of the National Democrat Party platform. There's even a guy in the legislature back in, I think it was 2004, Mike Weaver, tried to form a separate party within the caucus because they were kind of ashamed of the National Democrat platform on life matters and other things. So.
You've had to run, maybe with your picture next to Barack Obama. Didn't know what that had to do with Marion County. But in this race, do you still see that one the same way? Pretty much an Allison's?
Common sense would tell you that argument and that method of attack would be losing strength. Common sense and politics don't always jive. I have to say I don't agree with David about your voters should judge you, or whatever you said about who you hang with and that kind of thing. I believe you should be judged based on who you are. But I've got a suggestion. I've had my tongue placed squarely in my cheek.
Do I need to move over between you two?
No, I've been
Okay.
suggesting to other Democrats the first campaign promise that we should make next fall. And that would be that if you will send me back to my office and reelect me, I will promise that within 90 days from my reelection, I will support the removal of Barack Obama from office. Now, I don't know if that's going to fly, Dennis and David.
I hope people are quick enough to pick up on the dates that you're talking about, but okay.
But yeah, it's unfortunate. Probably I think history is going to tell us that no president was ever demonized by the other side more than President Barack Obama.
I don't know about that.
All right, moving on, if we could, and we're